"Sir, your daughter's story didn't end here." The janitor spoke as he stood beside the grave, holding a small child close. The billionaire paused, noticing the girl's hand tracing the engraved letters with surprising familiarity. The cemetery was quiet under the grey morning light, rows of classic European tombstones stretching into the distance. The janitor's hand rested steadily on the child's back, guiding her as she moved, precise and deliberate. Neither of them reacted to the billionaire's presence. Their stance suggested this was not the first time they had been here, and every detail, the timing, the posture, the calm attention to the gravestone, carried purpose. The billionaire stepped forward, studying them carefully. The janitor shifted the child slightly, keeping her close, then spoke with clarity. "She had a place in this child's life. A place you never knew existed. Keep with me for the full climax." The janitor had arrived before anyone else, carrying the small child close to his side. His steps were deliberate, precise, almost ritualistic, moving her toward the gravestone with a familiarity that suggested repetition. The child didn't speak, her tiny hand brushing over the letters as if she had memorized them long ago. From the shadows of the path, the billionaire approached, his footsteps cautious, measured. He had expected silence and solitude, but the sight of the janitor and the girl froze him mid-step. Neither of them acknowledged his presence immediately. Their movements were quiet, purposeful, and synchronized in a way that implied the gravestone held more than memory. It held secrets he hadn't known existed. The child leaned slightly against the janitor, seeking balance and assurance. He adjusted her gently, guiding her attention back to the name etched in stone. There was no panic in their posture, no rush, everything was precise. The billionaire noticed the calm authority in the janitor's stance and the child's instinctive familiarity with the grave. Every motion, every glance, suggested this moment was anticipated. The distance between them narrowed as the billionaire advanced. The janitor remained composed, the child silent, yet the air between the three grew taut, charged with unspoken understanding. Each movement of the janitor and child drew the billionaire further into the story he had been avoiding. He observed the small details, how the janitor shifted the child to keep her steady, how her gaze remained fixed on the stone, how nothing in their behavior hinted at surprise. There was a rhythm to the encounter, slow and deliberate, as if the moment itself demanded attention. Time seemed measured by small gestures, the child's fingers tracing the letters, the janitor adjusting his grip, the billionaire stepping forward with caution. The scene felt inevitable, unavoidable, and carefully orchestrated. Every small action carried weight, foreshadowing the revelation that awaited. The janitor finally lifted his eyes, locking them on the billionaire. The child shifted, leaning against him, waiting. The tension in the moment wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, precise, and undeniable. The stage was set. The truth they carried was ready to unfold, and the billionaire could no longer remain a bystander. The janitor's presence was deliberate, controlled, and precise. Every step he took with the child at his side was calculated, measured, not rushed, but confident. He adjusted the child's grip on the gravestone, guiding her hand along the letters with a practiced calm that suggested repetition, habit, and authority in his own quiet way. His posture was upright, shoulders squared, yet there was no arrogance. The way he held the child revealed patience and discipline, a careful balance of protection and instruction. He had a rhythm in his movements, a silent protocol for approaching the grave that made it clear this encounter was neither accidental nor casual. The child moved with ease under his guidance, tracing the engraved name with deliberate care, her small fingers precise in every motion. She did not speak, but her attention and focus demonstrated understanding beyond her years. The way she leaned slightly against the janitor, trusting him completely, revealed a bond that required no explanation. Her silence carried authority in its own way, demanding observation and acknowledgement without words. The billionaire approached with measured caution. He was older, over 50, with posture that suggested both strength and restraint. His footsteps were deliberate yet tentative, betraying a rare vulnerability. He had expected solitude at the grave, control over the moment, and instead found himself caught in a tableau where he had no immediate influence. His eyes swept over the pair, noting every detail. The janitor's steady control, the child's instinctive familiarity, the coordination in their movements. He did not interrupt, but his presence altered the rhythm of the encounter. The power dynamics emerged naturally. The janitor commanded attention without speaking, his authority born of knowledge, purpose, and timing. The child reinforced it, silent but assured, her connection with him lending weight to the moment. The billionaire's influence, usually unquestioned in his world, felt diminished here. He moved forward carefully, a man accustomed to control, now observing, analyzing, and preparing to respond. When the janitor finally lifted his gaze, steady and direct, the billionaire felt the weight of the unspoken understanding between them. The child shifted slightly, leaning into the janitor, signaling trust and reinforcing the hierarchy in quiet, natural gestures. Each character revealed themselves through discipline, focus, and measured actions, allowing their relationships, purpose, and subtle power play to emerge without exposition. The encounter was precise, taut, and cinematic, setting the stage for the revelation waiting at the gravestone. The janitor shifted the child slightly, adjusting her position so she could see the gravestone clearly. His grip was firm but measured, the kind of control that came from routine. The child's small fingers traced the engraved letters once more, deliberate, almost ceremonial. The billionaire paused a few steps back, observing, his hands loosely at his sides, restrained but ready. Every muscle in his frame hinted at authority, yet here, it felt restrained, challenged by the calm command of the janitor. Finally, the janitor broke the silence. His voice was low, precise, carrying no emotion beyond clarity. "She had a place in this child's life," he said, shifting his gaze to the billionaire. "A place you never knew existed." The billionaire's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing slightly. He stepped closer, careful not to startle either of them, but the subtle tension in his posture spoke volumes. He had not expected confrontation at this moment, nor had he anticipated the assertion of authority coming from someone so understated. The child looked up briefly, then back to the stone, calm and unflinching, her trust in the janitor evident. The janitor straightened, shifting the child gently, signaling that it was time for the truth to be acknowledged. His movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial. Every glance, every adjustment reinforced the structure of their relationship, the hierarchy in the moment clear without a word. The billionaire's presence disrupted nothing, yet his proximity added a new weight to the encounter. The tension was tangible, growing in small increments, precise and contained. "She was more than you realized," the janitor continued, his tone steady, commanding attention through its simplicity. "And she made sure someone would carry her memory forward." The billionaire remained silent, processing. His eyes scanned the child, the gravestone, the janitor's posture. Each element aligned perfectly, deliberate, unavoidable. He recognized the significance without needing further explanation. He shifted slightly, testing the ground between them, careful not to overstep. The child leaned into the janitor again, as if reaffirming the boundaries, the unspoken structure that governed the moment. The janitor's gaze met the billionaire's directly, unwavering. A subtle gesture, a tilt of the child, a firm adjustment of his grip, marked the transition from quiet introduction to the first real challenge. The billionaire's control, which had always been absolute in other arenas, now felt incomplete, restrained by the precision and focus of those before him. The child's fingers lingered on the gravestone. The janitor's posture was unwavering. Silence stretched, measured, charged, as the first real spark of conflict emerged not through anger or words, but through a structured assertion of purpose and authority. The billionaire, for the first time, faced the reality he had been avoiding. The revelation had begun, and nothing about this moment allowed retreat. The billionaire stepped closer, his polished shoes clicking faintly on the path. Each movement was calculated, the restraint of a man used to command, yet the presence of the janitor and child immediately tempered his authority. He expected acknowledgement, perhaps hesitation, yet neither came. The janitor adjusted the child subtly, shifting her weight, guiding her attention to the gravestone again. It was a quiet assertion of control, precise and undeniable. The child's fingers traced the engraved letters deliberately, pausing at certain points, almost marking them for emphasis. Her silence carried weight. The billionaire's usual instinct to dominate, to fill silence with command or explanation, faltered. Instead, he observed. Every small motion, the tilt of the janitor's head, the measured steps, the deliberate positioning of the child, spoke volumes. Authority was not in voice or wealth here. It existed in control through calm, intentional action. The janitor finally spoke again, his tone unwavering, low, deliberate. She ensured that her legacy reached someone who would carry it correctly. You never noticed, you never interfered, but it exists nonetheless. The billionaire felt the familiar grip of ego tighten. He had always commanded results, bent reality with decisions, moved people with influence. Yet now, confronted by a quiet authority and an unflinching child, that power felt conditional. His hands flexed subtly, his posture stiffened, but he maintained composure. The janitor did not shift, did not flinch. Every inch of space between them was intentional, measured. The child shifted slightly, leaning into the janitor's side. Her gaze remained fixed on the gravestone. In that act alone, she reinforced the janitor's control, the structure of the encounter. The billionaire stepped closer again, trying to bridge the gap, attempting to reclaim command. He spoke, his voice low, controlled, testing the waters. "I need to understand. Who is she to you?" The janitor's eyes remained calm. He adjusted the child's position again, subtly reinforcing the lesson. Authority here was not his to demand. It was earned by patience and precision. "She is the continuation of what was entrusted to me. You did not see her, but she existed. You could not guide her. I did." The billionaire processed the words carefully. His mind traced the implications. Ego met accountability. Control met discipline. Integrity and oversight, absent for years, were now reflected in the precise reality before him. Each pause, each calculated gesture of the janitor, was a mirror to the billionaire's absence, a challenge that required acknowledgement, not argument. He stepped closer still, bending slightly to observe the child's tracing of the letters. The motion was simple, deliberate, yet it conveyed layers he could not immediately articulate. It was proof of influence exercised quietly, through guidance, trust, and measured care. Every small movement reinforced that the true authority in this moment was the janitor, reinforced by the child's recognition of him. A subtle shift occurred. The billionaire's stance softened, not in submission, but in recognition of reality. His presence remained commanding in other contexts, but here it was secondary. He observed, reflected, and absorbed. Each glance, each pause, emphasized accountability. Years of inattention, of influence wielded too late or too little, became apparent in the stillness of their interaction. The moral and operational weight of oversight pressed gently but firmly. The janitor finally lifted his gaze directly to the billionaire, steady and deliberate, voice calm, words precise. "Everything she built, everything she left behind, is here. It was not yours to direct. It was mine to honor. You can only witness it now." The child shifted, leaning into him, reinforcing the hierarchy, asserting the boundaries without a word. The billionaire stepped back slightly, absorbing the lesson in quiet reflection. Control had shifted. Ego was tempered. Authority was no longer measured by wealth, influence, or expectation. It was demonstrated through deliberate guidance, discipline, and accountability. Every small gesture, the child's focus, the janitor's adjustments, the billionaire's pauses, acted as punctuation. Time slowed, each moment carrying significance. Silence became structured, impactful, a medium through which morality, responsibility, and influence were assessed without argument. The stage was set for reflection. The billionaire's internal calculations unfolded. Authority is earned, guidance is deliberate, and oversight cannot be assumed. The janitor, calm and precise, had orchestrated a confrontation not through confrontation itself, but through controlled presence, measured actions, and undeniable proof of competence. Every inch of the encounter reinforced that accountability cannot be bypassed. Integrity cannot be commanded, it must be demonstrated. By the time the billionaire exhaled, the shift was complete. The child's small hand remained on the gravestone, the janitor's stance unchanged, and the billionaire's position had subtly transformed. The balance of authority had realigned. The power dynamics, long overlooked, had been made clear. The encounter, quiet yet deliberate, reached its moral and structural peak, leaving the billionaire no choice but to confront the consequences of absence, oversight, and ego. The janitor straightened, holding the child slightly closer, his eyes fixed on the billionaire with unwavering calm. There was no accusation in his tone, no flare of anger, only a deliberate clarity that left no room for argument. The child's small hand lingered on the gravestone, her fingers tracing the letters slowly, intentionally. In that silence, the weight of the truth settled. The billionaire stepped forward, but each movement was measured, cautious. He had spent decades commanding rooms, shaping outcomes, controlling people, and yet here, the control he took for granted felt irrelevant. The janitor's quiet defiance, his unshakable composure, demonstrated authority that didn't rely on wealth or position. It was earned through discipline, purpose, and quiet action. The realization hit him with subtle force. The child, guided by the janitor, represented a continuity he had ignored. The legacy he assumed he controlled had been quietly stewarded by another. Every gesture, every deliberate pause of the janitor underscored what he had failed to notice for years. Influence is not inherited, it is maintained through vigilance and integrity. The janitor's eyes met his steadily, unyielding. There was no need for elaborate explanation. The message was clear. The billionaire understood, fully and suddenly, that his authority, untested here, had limits. The child's trust reinforced the lesson. The small figure beside the janitor symbolized the culmination of care, discipline, and responsibility, the very elements he had overlooked. A shift occurred, imperceptible yet absolute. Power was no longer abstract or assumed. It was visible, deliberate, embodied in calm actions and unspoken understanding. The billionaire's posture softened, his presence now reflective rather than commanding. The realization was complete. Respect, guidance, and accountability could not be demanded. They had to be demonstrated. In the quiet tension of that moment, the balance of authority irrevocably changed. The janitor and child held the moral and practical ground, while the billionaire became an observer to the truth he had long avoided. The turning point was clear, precise, and inevitable. The billionaire remained at the grave for a long moment, watching the janitor adjust the child's stance slightly, her small hand still resting on the engraved letters. He no longer attempted to reclaim control. Every gesture of the janitor, every measured movement of the child, had reinforced the lesson he had just learned. Oversight, integrity, and responsibility could not be commanded. They had to be exercised deliberately. As the billionaire stepped back, he observed the subtle rhythms of the pair. The janitor lifted the child gently and held her upright, guiding her away from the tombstone with careful precision. She followed without hesitation, her trust in him absolute. The billionaire noticed that their presence, their coordinated calm, carried a quiet authority that no wealth or influence could contest. The unspoken understanding between them defined the power structure more effectively than words ever could. He exhaled, the weight of years pressing lightly on his shoulders. There would be no confrontation beyond this. No demands, no arguments, only acknowledgement of the reality he had ignored. The truth was self-evident. The child's connection to his daughter, and the janitor's role in preserving it, had already reshaped his understanding. Authority and respect could not be assumed. They were earned and demonstrated. The billionaire watched as the janitor carried the child down the path, moving with deliberate care and precision. Every step reinforced the lesson he had been forced to accept. Accountability is not symbolic, and influence requires active stewardship. He remained at the gravestone, silent, allowing the moment to conclude without interference. The child's trust, the janitor's unwavering composure, and the orderly execution of their purpose provided a quiet victory that needed no amplification. In the following hours, he reflected on what had transpired. There was no grand declaration, no spectacle of justice. The consequences were internal, systemic, and undeniable. The child remained in the care of the one who had demonstrated quiet authority and moral clarity, the janitor embodying principles the billionaire had failed to enforce in his own life. It was a structured resolution, where right action prevailed through discipline rather than confrontation. By the time he departed, the grave no longer felt like a place of personal claim but a site of revelation and understanding. The janitor and child had asserted their presence with deliberate purpose, leaving the billionaire to reconcile the implications. The fallout was contained, precise, and quietly transformative. Control had shifted, accountability had been clarified, and the child's connection to his daughter remained intact, preserved not by wealth, not by influence, but by consistent, deliberate action. The final lessons settled firmly: respect, authority, and legacy endure only when nurtured, exercised, and acknowledged. The billionaire left the cemetery carrying understanding, but the janitor and child carried the tangible proof of what true responsibility looked like. The billionaire walked away from the grave carrying more than regret. He carried the understanding of what authority truly required. Power was not measured by wealth, influence, or titles. It was defined by action, presence, and the responsibility one chose to uphold. The janitor's quiet precision, his measured guidance of the child, and the unspoken discipline in every gesture had demonstrated a form of authority that could not be challenged by money or status. The child's trust in him, and her instinctive connection to the gravestone, reflected the subtle yet profound impact of consistent care and deliberate stewardship. Lessons the billionaire had ignored for decades became apparent. Oversight matters, accountability is not optional, and legacy exists only through action. In the end, the resolution was not loud or public. There were no rewards, no revenge, only the quiet, undeniable demonstration of integrity and purpose. True authority does not announce itself. It commands respect by fulfilling responsibility. Leadership is not claimed by title or wealth. It is earned through disciplined action and the trust it cultivates.